So we'll talk about Hanna, successes and challenges with the first Atlantic hurricane in 2020. Again, I'd like to introduce Mike Castillo, who will be helping me out here. So the tale of the tape for Hanna, we went over this before, so we'll do a quick review. Again, the first hurricane in busy 2020, first direct strikes into Dolly. Those were the calendar days, and Dolly was $1.05 billion. We say plus because we really don't know the actual values from flood damage because of so much uninsured properties here. Same deal with Hanna, 1.1 billion. It may be somewhere in the north value towards 1.3 billion or higher when we look at uninsured flood damage. So moving on to the crop and production loss alone, we'll talk about cotton a little bit longer. The direct crop damage was 176 billion. This was production when you added the additional nearly 200 million to it. But cotton, which was about to bowl out completely in late July, early August, really did get wiped out. The worst time to get a hurricane for cotton is anywhere between late July and mid-August before those fields are picked. And again, the third 1 in 100 probability event in 3 years. Once again, good news on the fatality front, but indirectly after the storm, we did have those 4 in Edinburgh. So let's go over the weather or the meteorological background. Initially, it was a tropical wave along the West African coast on the 11th of July. So this was a Cabo Verde event for all intents and purposes, although it took a long time to get going. It was fighting off some enemies, such as dry air and wind shear around it. So it remained an open wave until it reached the southeast Gulf, but still took on some time to congeal in the Gulf of Mexico, fighting off more dry air before it finally went from depression to storm south of Louisiana, as you can see here, becoming a 55-knot tropical storm by 7 p.m. Central Time on July 24th. So it took all the way to this location, literally south of the Texas-Louisiana border, to get its act together. But boy, when it got its act together, it certainly did quickly. Early on the 25th of July, just 12 to 18 hours later, it became Hurricane Hanna, and later on the 25th of July made landfall as a pretty good Category 1, 80 knots, 973 millibar central pressure, and it was under rapid intensification at that point. So we've had discussions with hurricane specialists in Miami, and they claim that over 100 miles more of warm water, and again, in low wind shear and moisture as it was at that time, it could very well have been a Category 3. And this track looks very similar to the 1933 Labor Day event, which also intensified fairly quickly in the Western Gulf. That one did become a Category 3. And for some of the lower valley remains the storm of record in terms of the combination of wind, surge, and rainfall. Speaking of rainfall, that was the big story with Hanna. So from the 24th of July to the 29th, we added in some preliminary rain, but we also added aftermath rain from feeder bands and broad southeasterly flow that occurred on the 27th and even the 28th to get this number. The vast majority of this value did fall on the 25th and 26th, directly associated with Hanna. But as you can see, southeast Hidalgo, far western Cameron, once again, they got hit for a third year in a row with more than 10 inches of rainfall in a short period of time. The McAllen Mission area also got hit, and needless to say, near that eye wall, especially the southern half of it, and we'll talk about that in detail shortly, a lot of rainfall occurred, a lot of this rural, but Port Mansfield, not so rural, almost 15 inches of rain occurred with Hanna. So here's your ground truth. Water was the big story. In Hidalgo County, we had lots of flooding here. This is 1, 2, 3 feet of water. The next day on July 28th of the event, so the rain had finally ended. We had some rain on the 27th that was up to 3 to 5 inches that added insult to injury here. But this is the important slide for the damage in terms of agriculture. The cotton bolls that were out. In this case, they are flattened. They are soaked. They're there, but when they're soaked like this, they just don't recover, and they can no longer be picked. They can only be plowed over. We get to Cameron County. We had flooding here in the Santa Rosa area. We all understand that there are drainage issues here that are being worked on, which is good news, but they also had 15 inches of rain at the sugar growers plant there on the county line. And this is very close to that location. And again, water into this home and up to 3 feet of water that I'm trudging through on a farm to market road, I think 509, which is between 107 and Santa Rosa. So the 107 had 3 to 4 feet of water in it too, and was unnavigable. It was closed off. You couldn't drive it. That's an important thoroughfare between Harlingen and Edinburgh. So no go at that case. The peak winds, hopefully you can see this if you're on a large enough monitor. Hurricane force peak wind sustained was here in Kennedy County, and we believe also made sustained values into northern Willacy County, and then gusts continued at hurricane force throughout Willacy County on into eastern Hidalgo, and even perhaps as far as parts of Starr. But needless to say, we had solid tropical storm force winds in the form of gusts across much of the valley, including the populated area. And that was one of the forecast elements that was a little underdone early on that we had to do some catching up to. But we'll describe that in terms of how we did that and some of the information you may have seen in our partner mails that went out starting as early as July 23rd and 24th. So the ground truth of the wind, this is very common here. We see this with many events from thunderstorms to hurricanes and all things in between. It was pretty bad in the Ravenville area and the Port Mansfield area. The winds were strongest here. So here's a light stanchion knocked over by the winds at the Ravenville High School football stadium. This is a poorly built building, lots of roof damage, but walls were also blown in. This is not quite as poorly built. This was a garage blown in Port Isabel, showing the importance of bracing a garage prior to a hurricane strike. Well-built building, roof is okay, but the garage didn't make it. Problem is, if the winds are strong enough and get through that, the roof could be lifted off very quickly now that the winds are inside the structure. But now we get to the valley, the populated valley, and here we have Hidalgo County, Colonias near Edinburgh, the San Carlos area, and these winds here were tropical storm force. We estimated at 65 to 70 miles per hour, demolishing this particular building, and heavy destruction on this flipped over trailer. But you can see nearby, some of these buildings are standing upright. So, it matters, the construction. And then unfortunately, we had 5 deaths due to carbon monoxide poisoning. But lots and lots of damage to Colonias from high-end tropical storm force, not hurricane, tropical storm force winds at this elevation. And much of these were in gust form. The 60 to 65 mile per hour, 65 to 70 was in gust form. The sustained winds that we could measure were generally 40 to 50 in these areas. Now, there was duration to it. It did last for 2 to 4 hours, so duration matters in terms of the continuous pressure you're applying to these buildings, but still, nothing was over hurricane force that we could assess. We had a tornado with this event in Brownsville. In fact, it was right near our office, and Michael described some interesting scenarios that our office went through during that event. But it was the EF0. The winds were hurricane force with the tornado at 75. It actually lasted for 3.5 miles. We think it may have gone farther south or begun farther south in Matamoros. We just couldn't get there. The max width was only 50 yards. You could see it clearly in the survey that we did. Good news, again, no injuries, no fatalities, but $250,000 in estimated damage in Brownsville from the warehouse buildings at the airport up into the neighborhood near Minnesota Avenue. Storm surge and storm tide, well, the biggest event was on the middle Texas coast and the coastal bend, specifically Corpus Christi Bay down to Bob Hall Pier. But we did have some run-up in the morning as the swells were propagating out from the hurricane as it had just begun to became a hurricane when it was out here, propagating those swells out. So it did flood the beaches briefly, but as it moved towards the middle Texas coast and eventually towards the King Ranch or the Padre Isle National Seashore area of Kennedy County, the wind shifted to west and blew those tides out. Unfortunately, it blew some water levels into the Laguna side, where we had some high water at docks and other structures for Laguna Boulevard on South Padre. So here's what the survey showed in the Corpus area. This is on the Padre National Seashore. Lots of water debris lines that moved in. And that does account for these above ground level value of 4 to 5 feet. And that 5.4 foot value was at Bob Hall Pier, which sustained severe damage and requires a full reconstruction to the tune of more than $35 million. So with that, I'm going to transition over to Mike Castillo, who's going to discuss Hurricane Hanna and the challenges to forecast operations at the Weather Service office here in Brownsville, serving the Valley. So Mike, it's all yours, and if you need me to run the slides on my end, I can. Otherwise, I'm going to share my screen with you right now, or let you share your screen.
That's
fine.
So you can pass it to me, and I'll share my screen.
All right, Mike, you have the con right now. All right, Mike, you should have it.
Okay. Okay, can you see my screen?
I see it, Mike.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to talk about the operations aspect of Hurricane Hanna and some of the challenges we were facing for a landfalling hurricane in our county warning area. So big question is, how do we prepare for a landfalling hurricane in our county warning area? So before the beginning of the hurricane season, we train and practice. We have one-on-one training with our staff. We have a workshop in order to review tropical operations and also look at the latest science as far as what goes on and as far as cyclogenesis of tropical systems. So when we do have a tropical system threatening our area, we spin up into our 12-hour operations. And so we go into 12-hour day and night shifts. And so we have a day shift from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and a night shift from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. And so we schedule all of our operational forecasters to work one of those 12-hour shifts. And so what we do is we split up the duties among the forecasters on each 12-hour shift. And so we'll have a tropical event coordinator. We'll have another person doing the tropical hazards and issuing the related graphical and text products. We'll have a forecaster working the short-term desk. They'll be handling the marine and aviation forecasts. We'll have a long-term forecaster doing the routine public text products, as well as our grid, most of our grids, forecast grids. We'll also have another forecaster on the radar desk. They'll be issuing the short fuse warnings during the event. And then we'll have the remaining forecasters doing social media, doing impact-based decision support services, and as you normally do with a tropical system impacting the area, we'll be doing 6-hour soundings. So they'll be helping out with the special releases for the upper air program. So we do a lot of collaboration and coordination before the storm, as well as during and after. We're collaborating with the Hurricane Center, including the Storm Surge Unit, as far as the watches and warnings, as well as the impacts, especially with storm surge across the lower Texas coast. We'll be collaborating with the Weather Prediction Center on rainfall for our area. We'll also be collaborating with the Storm Prediction Center on the tornado potential with a landfalling hurricane or tropical storm. We also collaborate with our Regional Operations Center in Fort Worth and our neighboring offices, Corpus and Houston, Corpus Christi and the Houston Galveston offices, so that we're all on the same page as far as our local forecasts, as well as the messaging for the event, so that we're all all on the same page as far as what the message is that we're trying to get out to the public. So in addition to the IDSS, and we're also doing email briefings, webinars, and conference calls before and during and after the event. And so we're having daily calls with the state of Texas, with the Emergency Operations Center. We're also having conference calls with local county, city, and school officials. And so we'll be doing that as we get closer to landfall. And then we're also reaching out to the local media, you guys, so that you guys are getting the same information that the emergency managers are getting, so that we're able to get the message out to everyone in the most effective manner, so that the public can prepare for a hurricane landfalling in the area. So getting ready for Hanna was interesting because some of our forecasters did not have any tropical experience since arriving on station here, and the other forecasters hadn't had any recent tropical experience since 2017 with Hurricane Harvey, and that wasn't even impacting us with a direct landfall. We have to go back to Hurricane Dolly, since was the last major hurricane that, or at least the last time we had a hurricane that impacted our area with a landfall. So in order to help with some of the challenges we were facing, and we do this every year, is we had a local tropical training workshop, which last year we actually completed the day before we began tropical operations for Hurricane Hanna, which was on July 22nd. So it was kind of not much difference in time between us completing that workshop and then getting ready for Hanna. So in addition to that, we do one-on-one training with the forecasters, and so we used Hurricane Dolly, since that was the last hurricane to make a landfall on our area. So we used that test case to practice creating tropical hazards and issuing related products. We started that May of last year through June of last year, so that also was instrumental in getting us ready for the tropical season and getting ready for Hanna. So during Hanna, we in addition to the 12-hour shifts, we also had a manager that was scheduled for each of those 12-hour operational shifts, so that we have a complete staffing to deal with all issues during the event. And so this was equally distributed during each shift before and during Hanna. And then management was instrumental in scheduling the forecasters and recommending what roles would need to be done during the event. And so here we are. This is at shift change, and so this was at 8 p.m. where the day shift was briefing the night shift, and so here this was during Hanna. So we decided to take a photo of all of us there, and you can see we're wearing masks since we were in in the thick of the COVID last summer. So as Barry mentioned earlier, we actually had to issue a tornado warning that was heading straight for our office. And so other offices, when they have severe weather, they once in a while have to have have to shelter in place because the tornado is potentially going to have a direct strike at the office. So in those instances, the backup office is usually called and notified that the office is going to take shelter, and the backup office will take over warning responsibility until the storm has cleared the area. So this was during the night shift on the 26th, and we're looking at the radar images, and you can see the reflectivity and velocity images that we were, this was the storm that had just passed just west of the office and continued to move north of the office. And so initially we had issued the warning as it was crossing into the United States, and then we contacted the Lake Charles office, and then they took over warning responsibilities. So this was at 4:07 a.m. Sunday morning, and so Lake Charles started issuing warnings on that storm that we took shelter until the storm passed, and then once it was safe, we came back and took back warning responsibilities back from Lake Charles. But that was one of the few instances where I've had to take shelter into the break room for the possible tornado hitting the office. So that was one of the interesting experiences during Hanna. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Barry.
All right, thanks, Mike. And that was some experience for all of us. The picture of the all hands on deck is just priceless, in terms of how we did that through the pandemic, and we're very safe, as Mike mentioned. But I was working the 8 to 8, as you all remember, during the daytime, and came in on Sunday mornings like, tornado right here, So knew right away that when things calm down, we need to hustle up a survey team. But as I said to others, the easiest survey I'll ever do, because it was 5-minute drive from the office, and even though we had a lot to see, it really didn't take very long because it was literally right next door. So, well, glad it wasn't in the office. That could have been a little bit worse, because there was some pretty good winds with that, as we mentioned before. So let's talk about communication successes and challenges. This, I think, will be an interesting part of the discussion for y'all as we move forward. We're going to go over things that we think went well, and some other things that we find interesting in terms of response to what we're putting out there. And then at the end of that, we'll close out with some Q&A that you all can take part in. And as far as housekeeping goes, I think we'll take a break at that point, so we can have some Q&A through the break, and then we'll come back with the seasonal preview. So to continue on with the Hanna theme, we started messaging what I call the hat trick of flood, not during the event, of course, but afterwards, because it was like, all right, 2018, we had this rare event where we had 12 to 18 inches of rain valley-wide, what ended up being several $100 million in damage, perhaps more. And then we thought, okay, that can't happen again, can it? Well, June 24th, 2019 proved otherwise. And while that was a shorter period event and not as many areas got the direct impact, some areas did get the same impact. It's like, okay, 2 years in a row. It can't happen 3 in a row, can it? Well, guess what? Hanna comes in, which is a more traditional flood maker, and it happens to come in July. So it's only a month later from those other two events in 2018 and 2019. So we had to message rainfall first. If you remember Hanna, the situation was showing its signs early that the southern half, or the southern semicircle, was going to be where the action was in terms of rainfall. And we really wanted to hammer that message home early in the game. We started doing that as early as July 23rd, which I believe was a Thursday. And then on the 24th, as we got more in the game, we put this out there for a briefing slide. And we also did it on social media. We'll show you that repeat shortly. But the key here is not just the rainfall, which is very important, but rainfall rates really, really matter when it comes to rapid onset flooding, especially rapid rises of water in poor drainage areas. So we've seen this story before, in 2018 and 2019 and 2015, we saw it also. And each time we had, with this kind of rainfall or rainfall rate, we'd have 2 to 3 or more feet of water depth in poor drainage areas. And some water rescues may be required, because we had that happen in 2018 and 2019. So we figured for the partners of all stripes, let them know that this could happen a full day in advance ahead of the first drops falling from Hanna. So you can see 1:53 p.m. on Friday, July 24th. The first significant drops of rain from Hanna were about 24 hours later. And we'll show you, we already showed you what the rainfall was. It realized pretty well. I mean, we had a little bit heavier rain in this part of Cameron and Hidalgo, but overall, this is a really, really good forecast for up to 48 hours in advance. So when we got to the day of, which was just before the heavy rains began, but what we thought may happen in terms of the visuals, we put this out there. It will look like this in some locations. We had our experiences in 18 and 19. We had our forecast in hand. We knew what the rainfall rates were going to be in the eye wall and in some of those feeder bands after the eye wall. So we put up Los Fresnos. That's the left picture here. The rest of these are in near Harlingen, and the rest are in Harlingen. And it's not to say that it was going to be Harlingen. It was just some locations would look like that. And you've already seen the aftermath in those pictures that started this presentation. It did indeed look like that in parts of the Rio Grande Valley. But now we had to discuss uncertainty and wind as Hanna was strengthening. And it was starting to drift a little farther to the southwest than just to the west. If you remember, Corpus Christi was where the action was at for the regional and national media. Now, y'all were doing a great job for the valley, but beyond that, we heard a lot of Corpus, Corpus, Corpus. We're kind of yelling down here saying, well, wait a minute, watch out for us. We're expecting the heaviest rainfall. And oh, by the way, now it's starting to turn a little more south of west. So this product went out. This is the watch and warning map, the tropical storm warning, in effect, on the 24th in the afternoon for the webinar that we did then. But I put this in there to allow the valley folks to understand that we might be expanding the tropical storm warning. There's no watches or warnings in effect for the Rio Grande Valley population, the heavy population, except for Raymondville. Port Mansfield. So what if this thing does get stronger and track a little far south of west, and we get wind too? We get more than just tropical storm force gusts. Uh-oh, that could be a problem. So possible expansion later today. And as I mentioned here, winds will be becoming a potential threat. Again, one of those reasonable worst case scenarios setting up here. So we had this product called the Hurricane Threats and Impacts, and you'll see a lot more on that after the break. And we mentioned here that we were pretty confident that we're going to see wind 58 to 73 mile per hour in the more unpopulated areas of our CWA, or service area, which is deep South Texas here, of the King Ranch over to the hunting country of Brooks County. But there's an orange line here, dashed line, likely to expand into these areas. And guess what? These areas now include Harlingen, San Benito, near McAllen, and now you're getting into bigger populations. So, of course, Raymondville, right? So we're concerned. So we basically mentioned the increasing potential for gusts over 50 miles per hour for the populated Rio Grande Valley. Again, this is a full day out before the first drops of rain from Hanna reach the region. Just kind of letting y'all know, okay, there's no warning up yet. This is not a wind situation to take lightly. We may see something more significant than is currently being forecasted on the deterministic forecast. This is a probabilistic idea that it could reach in to our population. And then, of course, there's the potential damage here based on the impacts that we would expect if those winds are realized in a reasonable worst case. So what happened? Well, we all know what happened. Hanna rapidly intensified to a strong Category 1 hurricane. It did indeed nudge to the south of west, and we all saw where it went. Once the Hurricane Center got a hold of that idea as it organized into a movement towards the Pins area, and here the Kennedy County coastline, we all kind of knew in the valley that we're going to get a piece of it. Exactly how much of a piece of it, still not quite sure, but definitely a piece of it. So now we have red areas that do extend to Raymondville, which is now for potential for winds of 74 to 110, meaning Category 1 or even Category 2 gusts. You can see 95 is on the edge of Category 2, along the coast. And then we say Ravenville to Falfurrias based on this hurricane threats and impacts, which does include probabilistic data, by the way. It does mention what could happen. And of course, we saw what happened, not only in Edinburgh as it reached a little farther southwest, but also in Ravenville. And then elsewhere, we were talking scattered power outages in this case. And then, of course, that became a little more widespread as Hanna continued to hold its strength and move even a little bit farther south of west. But still, we got on the game. We got into the game there. So in addition to those hurricane threats and impacts graphics that were modified a bit early on, we tried to provide special event briefings. So you all got the webinars once or twice a day as we got closer to the event. And then we decided to do these special short briefings, 1.5 to 2.5 minutes, not very long, that were kind of blow-by-blow updates on what was happening. Now, this radar was not from 7:30 p.m. It was actually, I think, 7:30 a.m. So that's my bad for not updating the title here. But there was a flash flood emergency in effect with bands coming into the Mid-Valley basically saying people should already be hunkered down, don't even think about going out this Sunday morning. If you're going to church or anything like that, don't go anywhere. Just stay home until everything passes. That was the message of this particular briefing, which we, of course, posted on social media. But we did share that with the group when it went out. And we were trying to do these about every 2 to 3 hours, similar to what you saw with Laura and my colleague up in the Lake Charles area back in late August. So I want to go over these next two slides based on surveys that some of you may have participated in. We sent it out to both of our partner groups, which ends up being roughly 400 to 500 people in total. And we got 38 responses back. Now you might say, oh, that's a small amount, but anything over 30 is an amount that we can work with and try to come up with some, realizations or some, answers for. So what we found was that y'all like graphics. Both yourselves and the emergency management community like graphics a lot. So the hurricane threats and impacts graphics that we just showed before, in terms of the briefing slides, we got a lot of really positive response here. And you all like the emails and the webinars and our webpage, which is really good news. Some of you also like the tropical cyclone watch warning text, which is very important to us because we spent over a decade working on that and refining it. And as you'll see in the next presentation, doing more refinements this season. So that's something to keep in mind. But notice on this next slide, where we highlight those areas of really effective use of our information, showing up in the blue and red. Oh, by the way, the colors here are not mine. This is by the response form that Google puts out. But hey, they do a real nice job setting it up, so we just take it what they had. But always or frequently is where we came up with that idea that graphics and partner briefings were really successful. You saw them, or used them, and then you also found them useful. So all the green areas were most used and most useful overall. Now I have this in red. This is the text version of Tropical Cyclone Watches and Warnings that we've been working on for years. And it came in a little low for our taste, at least in terms of used. But in terms of useful, it actually came up pretty good. The majority were extremely to somewhat useful, and only a few of you and the emergency management community found them not very useful. So that's a positive there. So really, that should probably be colored green, or maybe a lighter green, because usefulness was a little better than used. So those who used it liked it. And that's a good sign. Otherwise, it was all the graphics. But here's the one I want to find out more about. You all probably know this too. Facebook compared to Twitter is 5 or 6 to 1 ratio in terms of used here in the Valley. Before we looked at our numbers, we would go to town halls and be live in person and ask people, how many people are on Facebook? About 2/3 of the room would say yes. How many people are on Twitter? About 1/5 to 1/8 of the room would say yes. And sure enough, if you look at Twitter especially, it was the most either unused or most not used in terms of the usefulness of all of these parameters shown here. And if you remember this Google form, it had examples of all of these products and services, including our Twitter feed. So, why is Twitter so low? We're trying to break news on Twitter. And we can't do that in Facebook as well because Facebook has algorithms that kind of show you what you want to see. If you're really tuned into weather, you'll get them all, but you might not. But Twitter, if you're following us, you will get everything as it comes out in rapid fire fashion. But we're not getting much use out of it. Facebook was a little better in terms of used, and obviously it was a little more effective in terms of when it was used, how useful. But the numbers overall are low in comparison to all the graphical stuff that we show here. The older legacy text products were not as much used, although there is some people that showed that. It was a little bit unfortunate to see that our traditional text warnings, flash flood, tornado, etc., were kind of on the low end too. But that's a question for another day. This Twitter one is rather kind of head scratching, a bit puzzling. And I'd like to have that discussion with y'all during the open Q&A, either during the break from this session or during our more open messaging sessions that we'll have after all of our presentations are complete. So keep that in mind and keep this slide in mind as we move forward. So this is a slide you saw before, but this is the social media post that we put out at the same time or around the same time that we were doing that webinar. And these are updated rainfall totals, and as you can see, 1,000 plus shares on Facebook. So we have a 6-to-1 ratio, by the way, of Facebook to Twitter users or followers, and that's great. So we go to Facebook to do a lot of things because we know the users are out there. But this became pretty viral, and that's important because we're trying to emphasize dangerous flash flooding this weekend. And again, this is when Hanna was either still a depression or becoming a tropical storm. I think it may have actually been a depression at this point because we would have probably said Tropical Storm Hanna here. So it's getting the message out that you got to be ready for flash flooding. It's kind of like giving people a memory bank of the last 2 years before to say, look, we need to be ready, avoid roads, find a safe area, think about that now. And don't put your mind on Corpus because the Weather Channel and the National Weather Enterprise was looking at Corpus at this point. And we're saying, look over here, heavy rainfall coming to the valley, and really good sharing factor here that we think may have made a difference with people looking at our information. So this is the hurricane threats and impacts that can engage users. Now, the ones that you see on the webpage, and we showed the slides, are not quite as pretty as these, but we can make them pretty on site, and we did. And these went to social media. And as you can see, the importance of the hurricane threats and impacts, or HTI for short, is that it'll give you a color that you can recognize as danger. So when you see reds and purples, you're right away going to go to flooding rain and look for more information about flooding rain. And that's what we want people to do. And then you look at wind and you say, oh, I got red and orange in wind. I better look at wind too. And then you look at storm surge later. Now, if you work on South Padre, you're going to look at storm surge. But if you're in Harlingen or in McAllen, you're not really going to look at storm surge. And that's the intent here, is that we really wanted people to focus on flooding rain first, and then wind as it became more important. Now, when Hanna was a tropical storm, we worded it tropical threats and impacts, but still, we had high threat of flooding rain across basically all of our county boarding area, including the ranch lands, but really wanted to focus on the valley. And you would see wind as moderate, so it gives you an idea of, I better pay attention a little bit to moderate, so I keep it on the medium burner, not the back burner. And that's what HTI can do for you and obviously your viewers who can share it as well. But we like to put simple headlines out to get big responses, and this one did almost 50,000 reaches, just saying that Hanna's approaching. So, this is on Facebook, and you're probably saying, well, that's a tweet. Well, it was a tweet, but unfortunately, we only have 1/6 the amount of followers on Twitter that we do on Facebook. So we're duplicating a lot of effort because we have to. We need to reach as many followers as we can, and that may be the same for y'all on your social media pages as well. So you can discuss that here. I think that's the case, but let me know if that is or is not in our discussion afterwards. So clear message plus clear images equals success. These clearly show, we're still in a feeder band here. That's the leftover eye wall, as it's now a degenerating low, I think at this point. May still be a depression. And then here on satellite, you can now see this thing is forming up. So it is tropical storm Hanna, but it's probably heading towards hurricane level. You can see that formation. And then we just say in preparedness mode, do all the preparedness you can do for cleaning out storm drainage, because flooding was our big threat at the time. Again, there's that southern semicircle. It is really wet down here, and that was headed towards the valley. And then here, of course, during the event of the 26th of July, you're in the game, do not go out there. It's still raining hard. And all of this draws quite a bit of interest. Again, our Twitter feed is 1/6 of our Facebook feed, but we got 113 likes. And on the image at left, Representative Vicente Gonzalez, who has a much larger Twitter footprint than we do, retweeted it, and we think that's a big reason why our likes went up well over 100. So virality can occur in many forms, and when you get someone who's famous or who's known well on Twitter, it'll help us out too. What also helps us out is big impact. Just ask them. I know you all do this, but we might not always think about doing it in real time. But as the event's ongoing, we really want to see what's going on the ground. That ground truth comes in really, really handy when it comes to our decisions on how we're going to maintain, reduce, or upgrade a flood situation. We could go to flood emergency if we know there's 3 or 4 feet of water on the ground, even before the emergency managers get out there. We want to let people know this is going to get bad. Don't even think about moving from your home. Go to a higher level of it if you can in a flood emergency. And one of the things we always say when we're posting this is be safe doing so. We really do not want people to get out there and take a chance of walking into 3, 4, 5 feet of water. Take it from wherever you're safe. But sure enough, we did this, 53,000 plus reaches, 127 shares, and 200 shared photos and videos from the Valley came in from this simple ask early on July 26th. And it really helped us out in terms of determining what was going on at the time, and especially with rain continuing, that we may have to go to a higher level of threat, meaning an emergency type of warning. So great use of imagery for flood preparedness. I love this slide or this picture here, which is in our Weather Service infographic list. It shows what we have here in the Valley pretty much. We don't have these kind of trees per se, but we do have these kind of houses, and we do have driveways and streets that flood and storm drains that can clog. We also have swales or drainage ditches, if you will. We do have ponds and estakas, and we have canals, lots and lots of interconnected canals. So it's really great to show this to people because these terms are what we have in the Valley. And sure enough, we added the idea of clearing drainage, bringing in loose items, doing everything you can to protect from both rainfall, flooding, and wind in advance. So you're all free to use these as well. They are public domain on the weather, I think it's weather.gov/safety site. And then you can also get them from the Hurricane Preparedness site as well. So education is always worth a tweet. And we did a lot of that here. What does the forecast code mean? You'll see this slide a bit later on in our products and services information streams talk coming up. Also, the difference between inland and storm surge flooding. This is great. Heavy rain flooding would be, streets and ponds and driveways and open land. And we tweeted on this several times. And while the number of likes here is relatively small compared to other viral users or aggregators out there, for us it's a pretty good number. 15 retweets. Our typical retweet is 3 to 5 per day on a weather tweet, but we get 15. That means we're getting some followership there that's helping out. So always worth a tweet to educate. It's also worth a Facebook post. Hanna taught us that recovery messaging matters. I'm sure it taught all of us that. This came from the Monitor back on July 28th. At the time, there was a 12-year-old girl in critical condition. I think she recovered, so that's why we put 4 fatalities. We haven't heard any difference since then. But we did not have these infographics ready to fly immediately after Hanna, and then we had the generator issue in Edinburgh. So we created these well in advance of Laura's aftermath and the recovery period. And like I said before, they were immediately on their social media, their webpage, and other sources, right when they went from hurricane warning into late response and recovery mode. So this messaging matters. And now that we know, there's a heck of a lot more infographics out there. We even saw a few yesterday from Hidalgo County that were wonderful. The more you know, the more you can promote to all of our community as a unified message of safety and recovery. We're going to save a lot of lives from indirect causes that we've been seeing in the last number of years. And this is a message that is resonating from the top levels of our agency all the way down to us, and hopefully it's doing the same for y'all too as we move into the season. So in summary, going back to the whole Hanna story. Rainfall flood forecast was early, consistent, and accurate, and we know you guys for helping us out, get the message to the wide community. Again, our experiences in 2018-19 helped that message resonate from all angles. The wind forecast, however, was much more challenging. In the end, we saw what the hurricane force gusts did. They reached in farther west than forecast. In fact, there's a 90-foot tower in the city of Far on the north end there that had a 90-mile-per-hour gust. Now, again, most of our buildings and houses are lower than that, but it just showed that the stronger winds made it inland. So instead of having scattered power outages, we had nearly 200,000 without power at the peak of the cyclone early on the morning of July 26th. There were no direct deaths from flooding or wind, and that's a testament to the early unified messaging, and that includes y'all. We're really, really, really fortunate to have such a great group of partners in both public safety and media to get the word out and make this green headline here a reality. So hand clap, thank you to everything that you've been doing with us over the years. We want to keep that number at 0. And again, we mentioned before, the rapid transition of messaging to recovery. Now we saw what happened after Laura. We think that was very effective. Although we did lose lives, we think we could have lost a lot more of them. And now we want to apply that to everywhere, including the Rio Grande Valley, if, unfortunately, we get a 4th event in a row where we need to deal with how do people respond in the recovery phase to be on the safe side.